we're certainly talking about the fact that this is the start of a journey. Yeah. And we want to engage the higher education sector in that conversation. So we'd like to invite you to challenge us, to guide us on that particular journey, and to enter into that debate. Certainly, the feedback we're going to get from today and the conversations we're going to have we're going to utilize in a variety of ways. We'll utilize it certainly in terms of the challenge papers, which I'll refer to in a minute, which we've written and we want to develop. We'll obviously write to you after the session to see if you want to continue the conversation, if you want to continue those discussions and help us develop. And we want to look at potentially whether there might be new partners who want to help us and try things in a different way, or try to replicate what some of us have done in our activities. So it is a conversation. We are at that starting piece. So we're going to be talking to you a lot about things we're planning to do rather than things we have done, although there are some elements of that as well. So we're going to share that piece with you today and hopefully get you to engage. The partners are a beautiful bunch of people. Andrea, Holly, Colin, Maggie, Heather, they will all be sharing their ideas and their perspectives today. But the partners are from Glasgow, Caledonia, from University of Highlands and Islands, Warwick, Birmingham City, Dublin City University, and myself from Abertay, and Andrea from Abertay University. We all operate in slightly different ways. We're all universities of different sizes and different missions and different perspectives and different types of students, and so actually, the ways in which we use the diagnostic approach, if we utilize it, will be different, and they'll be influenced by the personalities. They'll be influenced by the courses that are operating them, and so we think actually, hopefully, it'll be a really interesting test for the ways in which we might approach things. So those are the partners today. What are we hoping to do? Well, as I said to those of you who were here earlier, you've got me hopefully for a relatively short period of time talking about it, so giving a brief introduction and overview as to what we're trying to do. Maggie Gibson from Birmingham City University is going to be talking to you about what they've been trialing over the last couple of years and how that's worked. We're going to talk to you about, then give some more specific case studies and examples of what's going on at Warwick with Holly, what Heather's going to be planning to do at UHI, and what we're planning to do at Abertay. That will probably take about 45 minutes. We're then going to have a little break because it's hot, but also give you the opportunity to refresh yourselves if you haven't had a chance yet to look at one of the papers. And these are and the papers that we've produced are within the Padlet that was sent around prior to this activity. And we've tried to look at diagnostics in very short, 2 pages papers, looking at sort of the macro level implications of diagnostic testing, obviously the institutional level, the meso level, whether that be departmental or faculty, and what those implications might be, but also then at the micro, whether that be the module or actually the student, and what are those implications. So those are available on the Padlet, which will be posted in the chat if you haven't seen it before. And perhaps in that 10 minutes, you might want to have a look at one of those particular papers. Following that break, Colin from Glasgow Caledonia is going to put us into some little groupings, and we'll have that sort of have a little debate around diagnostics and the way forward, and whether that be whether the micro, the meso, or the macro level. Or actually, maybe it's just about actually some perspectives you think you want to bring to conversation, and help us develop a way forward. And then finally, Andrea Cameron's going to talk to you about how we do move forward and what your engagement might look like before I come back and then summarise. So that's the plan for the next hour and a half, hour and 3/4. We'll see how that conversation takes us. The reasons why we're here are, well, they start off with a very simple thing in that we wrote a bid to the QAA, and the QAA thought it might be an interesting idea to look at. It was under the enhancement themes of resilient learning communities in Scotland, and the partners decided actually this might be an interesting thing to investigate. Personally, for me, it comes from having some experience in this area when I previously worked at Birmingham City University with Maggie. and we've been interested in it. But obviously, from an institutional perspective, and we will all recognise the issues around student retention at universities and how we enable our students to succeed at university and get those graduate level outcomes. Now, clearly, what we're thinking at in this discussion is how we might utilise diagnostics to more effectively help students in that way, and that's about the personalisation of that student journey. It's about empowering students, perhaps through better understanding of where their skill sets are to be successful at university, and so potentially around that personalisation piece, but also around, and a lot of us talk about this, about the moral imperative actually of universities to actually say, well, we've actually accepted you into our university, therefore presumably we must really believe in you. You have the capabilities and the capacities to actually be really successful at this university. So how are we going to help you to do that, rather than just taking an entire cohort type of approach, whereby you might say, actually, well, we all expect you all to survive. Well, actually, it shouldn't be about survival. Presumably, it should be about how do we enable our students to thrive at university. And I think that's something we were all interested in as the partners. There's also a piece, certainly from my history at BCU and Warwick and various other universities, around learning gain. And I know some colleagues on this call have experience of the learning gain activity, but certainly Higher Education Funding Council in England supported some projects which looked at learning gain previously, and now they were talking about the added value of coming to university. Not only from an institutional perspective or societal perspective, but also to show the individual students how they're progressing through their courses, how they're becoming better learners, how they're becoming more employable. How do we show students actually that they are making that progress? So that was clearly, again, something that was going on in our mindset. We're also acutely aware of what's been going on for the last 16 months in terms of the pandemic. We shouldn't be making assumptions about the cohort of students who are going to walk through our doors in September. They will have had an incredibly disrupted education for the last 16 months. Have they had the validation perhaps of an A level or a higher? Actually, probably not. How confident are they? Are they overconfident? How are they adapted to all these issues around mental health and well-being? How are we going to better adjust as institutions to support these students? How can we help them realise where their strengths are and where they still need to develop and where they might need support? So that was something, again, that was clearly going on in our mind, as well as, actually, obviously, recently, and we've all noted significant technological advances and how we might actually make such activities such as diagnostics scalable. So how can we might use automated assessment? How can we use AI? How can we enable students to engage in new ways? So those are some, again, one of those drivers. Perhaps the time is right. And certainly, then also we would definitely welcome your engagement in, and I suppose, the language of diagnostics. And certainly we've had a number of discussions about diagnostics perhaps being something of a negative term, certainly a controversial term. I mean, that's why we deliberately put it in the title to advertise this work. We know diagnostics is controversial in that term, in terms of using that terminology. We might, and I'm sure Maggie will go on to talk about it, but whether we call it discovery tools or whatever, how do we utilise that language, and how do we take those types of things forward? So that's where we are in terms of an introduction to what we're doing today, and I welcome all those of you who have unfortunately joined us slightly late. I was just given a brief introduction to the activities today. I'd now like to introduce Maggie Gibson from Birmingham City University, who's going to talk to us about how they've trialled diagnostic activities at BCU and what the sort of early results are in that space. Maggie, hand over to you.
Thank you, Luke. I'm going to share, or try and share, my screen with you. Okay. Hopefully you can see that.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Excellent. Hi everyone. It's really nice to be with you here today. My name's Maggie Gibson. I'm Head of Learner Development at Birmingham City University. That means I lead a central team of learning developers, and I also have some responsibility for some of the digital assessments and the proctoring that goes on at the university. For this section, I'm going to try and give you an overview of the approach that we're piloting at BCU this year and how that is working, what we're doing. So first of all, what do we mean by diagnostics and diagnostic testing? In this workshop, what we're talking about is a tool or a test that enables students and all staff to gain an understanding of students' skills, confidence, experience, abilities, levels, and provides feedback to enable development. Many HE institutions have some kind of activity like this available to their students. For some, they're compulsory, for some, they're optional, for some, they are a referral, and they can take all sorts of different forms. So, for example, university entrance tests, in-depth writing assignments, and self-assessment questionnaires are really common. And they can cover a variety of different areas of the student experience. So well-being, digital skills, academic skills, writing, English language, maths is common, and subject-specific knowledge. And then the outcomes can be different. You can get a score that places the student in a particular position within a cohort, or a report that highlights areas for improvement, signposting to support and additional resources, or even enrolment onto a course to support the development of skills. So a real variety of different approaches are out there. And at BCU, the model we developed came out of the recognition that transition into university involves many elements. So it's not restricted to what you would traditionally think of as subject content. And it can be really complex and stressful for students. So we've got Lizio's model here on the screen. It's a model for transition. It highlights the variety of challenges that students are facing as they come into university. And at BCU, we have a large number of students from the local area, a large number of students from disadvantaged areas of the city. So our student population has a range of backgrounds and a range of educational experiences. And we find that academic staff often aren't able to get a feel for the strengths of their cohorts and the areas that might need more development until maybe after their first assignment has been done, handed in, marked, and returned to them. And we wanted to bring that timeline forward and support our students in developing their confidence and their skills from the moment they come into the university. We couldn't find anything out there that existed that would really cater for large numbers that we might want to use it with, but also in the way that we wanted to use a tool with our students. So we developed a tool ourselves. And we wanted to create something that firstly could be used during induction or pre-induction to enable module and course teachers to find out about their new students as they come into their courses. We wanted something that was easy to use and non-threatening for students, so not a really stressful test or an exam. We wanted to give staff usable information so they could actually tailor their teaching to the cohort that's coming in. And we wanted to encourage our students by highlighting their strengths and the skills that they already have that they're coming into university with, so give them a bit of confidence. We also wanted something that gave students an idea of what was available in the university for them to take advantage of and connect them to the different things that are out there, the different services, the different resources that are available to them. And lastly, we wanted something that wasn't too labour intensive in delivering or in marking. So as Luke mentioned earlier, we've consciously avoided using the words diagnostic and test because they position students in deficit, and what we're really trying to do is understand our students and make sure that we're meeting them where they are as they enter the university. So our model at BCU looks like this on the right. So you can see there are two elements after the tool has been engaged with. We've got the right hand side, which is informing course and cohort development, and then we've got individual student development down the left. And it's designed really with the view to beginning to address some of those elements in Lizio's model, the connectedness, the capability, the purpose, and the resourcefulness. by informing course teams and support services about the academic skills, the academic literacy, the numeracy, the digital literacy, and the wellbeing competencies and needs of an incoming cohort, so that appropriate targeted teaching and support can be put into place from the start of the academic year. And we wanted to enable the university to understand its incoming students and adapt teaching to the cohort and raise awareness of the value of embedding the development of academic literacy and other skills within subject teaching. But of course, also it provides an opportunity to build student resilience by improving their awareness of their own skills and areas for development. They are invited to reflect on their current practices and possible alternatives, as well as being provided with a sense of what might be expected of them at university. We don't view it as a test. One of the principles in the design was that we don't give any kind of mark or ranking to students. We're focused around strengths and areas for development. So the design is designed to take 30 to 40 minutes to complete. It's fully digitally delivered within our VLE, which is Moodle, and it's automatically marked. There's 45 questions in the tool altogether, and they are multiple choice in style. We have two types of question: competency-based questions, which are designed to gain an understanding of the student's skills and expectations around higher education study, and some self-reflective questions, which are designed to establish the confidence and the perceived needs of the students themselves. So we really wanted those two different types of questions, and we couldn't find a tool out there that does that. So that's why we created our own. So the areas for focus within the tool are studying at university, which has two subsections: getting the most out of university and study methods, academic writing, referencing, reading and analysing texts, numeracy, which is split into working with numbers and working with data, digital literacy, and wellbeing, which is split into mental health and wellbeing and dyslexia and specific learning difficulties. And I've got some examples of questions that we put into the tool that we're piloting at the moment. This first one is about academic writing confidence. So we're trying to establish how confident students are at writing academically coming into university. And then we have one on understanding paraphrasing. So we find that's an area of confusion quite a lot. So we're trying to sort of understand what students understand from that. And this one is about digital tools and e-safety. So a bit of a mixture, but they're obviously interspersed with others. And so once they've completed the tool, students get some feedback in the form of a short report, which comes via email, and it identifies 3 areas of strength and 3 areas for development. And with that comes suggestions for how students can begin to develop those areas, and some signposting to different support and resources that are available in the university. And it also connects students to our online transition course. So there is something that students can do straight away. As soon as they've finished using the tool, they can go out there and do the course and focus on different areas that have been suggested. The student report is automatically generated by a program that scores and ranks each question, applies weightings, creates the report and emails it out to the student. So that all happens automatically, which means we can cater for large numbers. Once all the students on a course or a module or a group have used the tool, a summary report is created to inform the course team about the areas of strength and the areas for development that have been identified for the cohort. And it provides a recommended action plan for embedding that learning within the course or the module. And that report is created by a member of my team, so it's created by hand. I've got some examples here. So there's a snapshot from in a student report. That's an area of strength. So you've got the area of strength and some blurb about why it's important, why it's good that they have that as an area of strength. And then there will be areas for development as well. So there's lots of resources suggested there, lots of avenues to pursue for the student. Then within the staff report, that's part of the action plan. So you can see there's sort of 5 or 6 steps there that a member of staff can take to try to embed some of the learning within their own teaching. So it sort of ranges from things they can suggest students do, to things they can do within their classes, to resources that are available to them within the university. And our initial observations. So it's a pilot at the moment, but 3 sort of main things come out from the student reports. First one is that many students do lack confidence in writing and in numeracy, despite the report suggesting that they are actually very competent in those areas. They are maybe where we would expect them to be coming into university, but they do lack that confidence. And also, interestingly, students don't necessarily have an understanding of digital tools and e-safety. So whilst we might assume that today's students are digitally savvy, they often appear to have patchy understanding. So I don't think we can make the assumption. We need to be quite aware that they may need some support in that area. And lastly, a large proportion of students have been referred to the mental health and wellbeing team or the dyslexia and specific learning difficulties team. It is a soft referral that comes out of the report. It's really a recommendation that the student contacts that team, but really the majority of students do receive a suggestion that they contact one or both teams. So that is quite an interesting thing to come out of that, especially at the moment in the pandemic. And then feedback. So this academic year, we've had just over 400 students complete the tool, and they were from 19 cohorts. The majority were education, psychology and media students, but we did have some from computing and some from business modules. Feedback from the students has been positive regarding the ease of use of the tool and the usefulness of the report at the end. Academic staff have found the action plans and the links to resources really useful, and they've used the summary report to request resources and bespoke classes from my team. One of the media courses used the tool as a major element of a professional development module for first-year students, and the assessment for that module was based around an action plan that the students developed out of their report from the tool. And that course leader is very keen to use the tool again this coming academic year, and he's been discussing with me making it more bespoke to his subject area. So overall, feedback has been positive, and we're beginning to look at how we can adapt and improve the tool to cater for subject areas more specifically. The challenge is that it's often optional for students to engage with this tool. So we have the usual problem of the students who might benefit the most not taking the opportunity and therefore not getting that benefit. And that is me. That's me done. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Maggie. And presumably the continuing evaluation of outcomes will look at retention data and student success over the coming years. But as I say, we're at a point in the journey, aren't we, in that respect? And we are where we are, and we just need to keep an eye on it and keep developing. Yes,
yeah, it's really interesting.
Absolutely. Okay, that's brilliant. Thank you for that, Maggie. I'm now going to invite Holly, then Heather, and then myself, just to outline quickly, 5 minutes each probably, just what we're attempting to do in our particular institutions this year that reflects obviously some of the work that BCU has done. So over to you, Holly.
Thank you, Luke. So I'll just try to share my screen with everyone. Hi everyone, my name is Holly Heshmati. I'm the course leader for secondary PGCE Maths at Warwick University. So I wanted to give you a bit of background about our diagnostic tool, which we don't call it Diagnostic, the same as Luke and Maggie. We call it Teacher Resilience Program at Warwick. So we started this work back in 2018, and the rationale we had for this work was the issues we had with attrition for new teachers, which is currently around 50% for new teachers within the first 5 years of teaching. Our course is a postgraduate one, so we have students who are doing a one-year course with us post their undergrad program. So when we started this work in 2018, as I said, the program was called Teacher Resilience Program. We had 25 students on the pilot study, and we focused on areas which were about their professional practice and their academic skills at university. So looking at the issues we had, because when we refer to diagnostic assessments, we need to look into that within the context we're working. So for us, we realized that the issues we had with retention, they were related to some contextual factors related to their school placement, and then school culture. Some of it was the academic demands of the master's level work they had at university, and then issues with professional practice at school, and some of it was with the ITE program. So when we looked at different factors having impact on students' outcome and retention, we focused on the following aspects, which were professional and academic. I'll explain what they are: motivational, emotional, social, and well-being aspects. So within the diagnostic we had, I realized that there were differences with the one Maggie was doing with BCU. And the differences were, when we started with our teacher resilience program, we started with this tool, which was a quiz for students to do, and they had different questions within each of those strands. The strands were, I've got 6 of them here. So within these strands, if I look at the professional aspect of their practice, which was mainly related to their school placement, we had various questions here. The students didn't have to complete the whole diagnostic tool together, so they could just look into one strand and complete the quiz for that one. So some of the example questions here for the professional are here. So once the student was completing the questions for the professional, so the first one, I'm able to adapt to changes. We used Likert scale, which was from strongly agree to strongly disagree for students to respond to this question. Based on the score they would get for this strand, then we signposted them to the resources we had for professional aspect of their course. So the resources were scenarios, were videos, were experts and teachers, academics, doing videos with students and giving them tips and advice about their professional aspect of their work. And then we had other strands here, which were the motivational, emotional, and then social and well-being as well. The same as Maggie, the connectedness here was really important for us because our students spend 20% of their time at university. They spend 80% of the time within their school placement. So we felt like their relationship with school mentors, other teachers in the school, and student at school was really important. Within the well-being strand, we looked at both the university side of the work and the school one. And this was including both their physical well-being and also the emotional one. So we looked at their, we asked questions about their diet, their sleeping, physical activities, exercise, work-life balance, and so on. And then the final step was looking at their academic skills. So one of the issues we have within our program, because many of our students spend most of the time in school, they really don't have time to engage with essay writing sessions university offers for master's level courses. So again, the same within this strand, we had these questions within our diagnostic assessments, and based on the responses, again, we signposted the students to the asynchronous workshops we had within this strand. So the initial findings we had based on our diagnostic showed that our students struggled mainly with the professional aspect of their work. Workload was a problem, work-life balance, and the essay writing. It's too early to talk about the outcome and the impact of our diagnostic tool at Warwick. However, I must say that the 25 students who participated in the pilot study, we had the full retention for these students, which is above the average we have for the whole cohort, which is around 90% retention. We're working on our diagnostic for this year as well, and the aim is to develop our diagnostic that we will have a report for staff as well. Currently, the way our diagnostic works is mainly signposting students to the resources available for them. So the next step for us is engagement from staff to involve with our teacher resilience program. Thank you very much. Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Holly. It's really interesting. I know I should have known most of that, but some of that was new to me, so that was really interesting. Thank you. Can I hand over to Heather now, who will give us the perspective from UHI?
Afternoon, colleagues. I don't know if anyone can hear me.
We can.
Great. I'm struggling with a sticky mute button today, so I found myself muted when I didn't need to be and vice versa. Thanks very much. I'm just going to talk briefly. My name is Heather Fotheringham from the University of the Highlands and Islands. I work in our Learning and Teaching Academy, delivering professional development and also supporting staff with quality enhancement initiatives. And I'm the staff lead for our involvement in the enhancement themes for this cycle. We are kind of newcomers to this cluster and we haven't started piloting the work yet, but we became interested as an institution who's always had issues with retention in various corners of the university, and we've undertaken various initiatives to try and deal with these. When I first joined the institution 10 years ago, actually, it was my job to investigate areas of low retention. So this cluster was very interesting for me personally. It also coincided with a kind of re-emergence of this conversation about how to deal with retention within one of our faculties in science, technology and engineering. So as a result of that, there are two of our programs that next year are looking to pilot these diagnostics. They're very slightly different programs. So the first one is Sustainable Rural Development, which is an online degree program. It's been running fully online for a number of years, has never been a face-to-face program. It already has quite a strong pre-entry element that was developed by the program leader, really to gear students up for learning online. And what we're going to do with the pilot is integrate the diagnostic into that pre-entry element as a way for the program team to shape the content of any support that they're offering students at the induction session that happens at the beginning of the course, and also kind of any bespoke sessions happening after that. The second program is Environmental Science, and this is an HN program, so it goes from HNC to HND into third year degree. We tend to get younger students on this program, so that the Sustainable Rural Development does attract older students and returners to education. Environmental Science, we tend to get more school leavers. And it's also a face-to-face program delivered at a couple of our different sites throughout the network of colleges that we have in UHI. So slightly different cohorts. What tends to be the case with this cohort is that sometimes students are struggling with some of those key skills when they come in through HNC, HND and into degree. As a result of this, the program already has interwoven into its fabric drop-in study skill session across all the years actually of the program. And what the diagnostic will do within this program is to help shape the content of those drop-in sessions. So rather than just addressing kind of generic issues, the staff can target the content of those sessions really to address any areas of weakness that are shown through the diagnostic. And I think whilst we're still kind of in discussion about how this will work in practice, this will be something that we'll do across all years, so it won't just be the first years in the programme. So perhaps a slightly different approach to some of the other institutions, that this will be something that will not just be offered to first year students only. And just one final point, I suppose Holly has given an example of quite a bespoke approach to the diagnostic. we're quite a small institution and we don't have a huge amount of resources. So we're really looking to work with the cluster for a kind of off the peg resource. And I think that's, you know, maybe important to point out that all of us here will be doing very slightly different things with this tool. And I think there's hopefully room for all of us to do kind of just very basic, using the off the peg tool to very bespoke, using it in that very bespoke way. So hopefully we can all get something of value from this work. That's all from me.
Thanks, Heather. As you say, different institutions, different size, different visions of the way this might operate. And again, I'm sure people involved in this call will share their different perspectives as well. So yeah, thank you very much. Quickly, I'll just share what we're planning to do at Abertay. And I suppose at Abertay University, we were presented with a nice opportunity in that the elective module in the first years, which is a 20 credit module, it was decided institutionally prior to my arrival that electives were to be phased out and they were to be replaced by micro-credentials. We saw the opportunity when I joined the university to adapt those micro-credentials to focus upon transition in the first year experience. And obviously, we also saw, therefore, the opportunity to engage with diagnostics in that respect. So we're, rather than going for a gentle modular or course bespoke approach, we're planning to go big bang and engage with diagnostics across our entire first year cohort in September. And the way we're going to utilize this, I'll just quickly share my screen. The way in which we're going to engage with this is that we are going to build a diagnostic into a 5-credit module, which is called Being Successful at Abertay. And it's a mandatory module which all students will have to undertake. And that diagnostic will be very similar to the one Maggie described, a fairly soft diagnostic that directs students to activities. The assessment within the module will actually be the action plan, not the diagnostic. So the diagnostic is almost a formative tool within that process. So students will be directed then to, as I say, strengths, weaknesses, challenges, opportunities, because what we recognise, and I think everybody's alluded to, you know, pandemic and issues around not only the academic integration of students into university, but also the social integration of students into the university. So students will then be able to choose from the 8 other micro-credentials, all of which are worth 5 credits. So basically, they've got to pick out 3 of those. And those might be around academic issues such as successful writing or digital skills or research and inquiry or communication. Or they might be around the much more social and community engagement pieces. So we're really delighted to be able to work with our student association to run a micro-credential about welcome to Community. That's the River Tay, and there's a play on words there, which I'll explain to our visitors from overseas on this call. But actually, that's around student engagement and the community. How do you become an effective member of the university community, from clubs to societies to repping to mentoring, etc.? That type of aspect. The Dundee and Me one is actually how do you become part of the city? How do you, as a student, how can you become part of the city and the Dundee culture and what's available online? The well-being piece is built around the models around mental health and well-being and the 5 ways there. So and planning careers about career aspirations. So we're trying to enable our students to really think about not only their academic development at university, but also that social development piece. Because actually what we need to recognise, we believe anyway, is that we need to build within our students the foundations for student success at university, whether that be through an academic route, but also through being able to manage themselves and manage their lives at university. And so this is the approach that we're taking at Abertay. And obviously for us, it's really exciting. And obviously, as we develop and develop the outcomes from that, we'll share wider with the community. So what I hope that has done is, through the examples we've shown, is look at things from Maggie talking almost from a voluntary perspective, one where it might be a module or a program or course-based perspective, to Holly giving that sort of cohort approach. Heather talking about, again, different ways in which they might be engaging in terms of programs, but also bespoke packages. And Abate, where we're sort of looking at that whole year approach and to ways in which we might help develop, again, not only the individual student, but as Maggie said, can we give better information to cohorts, our cohort teams, our program teams, about how, what their cohort's looking like, where those strengths and weaknesses might be. So that gives you a flavour as to what the partners are doing, and again, hopefully we'll engage you in that conversation as we move forward. I'm now going to give you a break, which you'll be delighted to hear. Within the chat function, I think Colin has posted the Padlet that we originally sent round, which has got the 3 papers in around the meso, the macro, and the micro. And as I said at the outset, and apologies to those who have joined us slightly late, I know there were some issues around enrolling onto the course. But what we outlined was that we've developed these 3 papers, and we'd like to, they're only short papers, they two sides, but they're talking about some of the challenges we might face at those different levels. And we'd really welcome the opportunity to discuss those with you after the break. So we're going to give you about 10 minutes. So I'm going to suggest Colin Milligan from Glasgow Caledonia is going to lead the next session. So Colin, I'm going to suggest we all get back together again at about 3 o'clock, if that's okay. So that gives you about 11-12 minutes to either run away and get a cup of tea or something cold, because it might be hot where you are, or alternatively get a cup of tea very quickly and then quickly scan a paper, and then we'll bring you back about 3 o'clock and Colin will lead us through the next phase of what we're trying to do. Is that okay, everybody? Excellent. Okay, shall we see you in about 10 minutes time? Thank you.
Thanks, Luke.
Okay, hopefully everybody is back. Most importantly, hopefully Colin's back. And excellent. Okay, I mean, just before I'll just hand over to you, Colin, just to let you know, and I meant to say in the introduction, to say we've had over 100 people have expressed an interest in being part of this conversation, which is really encouraging. But also, it's not just the UK. We've had people sign up. I'm just looking at the list now, obviously from Ireland, from Sweden, Belgium, Turkey, USA, and South Africa. So those, hopefully some of those people are on this call today. If they're not, I'm sure they'll be looking forward to watching the recording. So the conversations we're having aren't just about what's going on in the UK. This is a much more of a general interest, and I just thought it'd be useful to share that with you. I will now shut up and hand over to Colin, who's going to guide us through the next portion of this workshop. Thanks, Colin.
I'm still typing a message to Jack.
I can keep.
Colin.
I can keep talking for another half an hour if you want me to, but it's probably best if we actually do something productive.
Yeah, that's okay. Hello, everyone, and nice to see you all here today. My name is Colin Milligan from Glasgow Caledonian University. So for the remainder of this session, we're going to make it a little bit more interactive. So we're going to assign you to a series of rooms, each led by one of the people you've heard speaking to you already today, as well as Andrea Cameron from Aberdeen and myself. So there'll be 6 rooms in total. And I think Jack, who's supporting us here today, is going to assign people randomly to a breakout room while I'm talking, and then we'll press the button when I finish. So the idea is that we've been through the papers that we prepared for you, and we chose some questions that look like they might support some interesting discussion, and we've put those into another series of Padlets, and we'll tell you where to get those Padlets just now. And basically, if you go to those pages, then each of us will lead a conversation around the 3 or 4 questions in that Padlet. And we'll spend about 5 minutes getting ready, another 15 minutes chatting, and then 5 minutes sort of summing up and deciding what to report back. Now, we've not put any pressure on anyone. The reporters will be the presenters today, so I'm not going to be pointing at anyone and saying, please report back. But I do hope that you'll contribute to the discussions. We've seen quite a lot of comments on the central Padlet board and a few comments in the chat as well. So hopefully there'll be quite a lot of discussion. If anyone's got particular questions that they want to address, then of course you can just add them in on the Padlet. We'll find those comments and we'll steer the conversation in that direction. This is, I suppose, I wouldn't like to say that none of us are experts. None of us are world leading in the area, although Maggie's got quite a lot of experience now. But I think the key thing is that everyone's learning here. This is a community of practice where we're trying to learn. We want to try and raise some of the issues, some of the key issues. We were deliberately provocative by saying things like using the terms diagnostic testing, because certainly at GCU you wouldn't get away with that using that term, and we've heard that at BCU and at Abertay and at Warwick it's the same. So we know that diagnostic testing isn't the term to use. It was very much presented to encourage people to come along, so we're sorry about that. Anyway, so if Jack is ready, I don't know if Jack is ready in the background. As I say, we should all be pushed into a breakout room, one of 6 breakout rooms. And if the leads can then, once they're in the breakout room, if you can paste the Padlet URL into the chat and people will be able to follow that. It's nice and simple. It's the same URL you've been given plus either a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6. So I'm just going to wait and hope that Jack presses a button. Well, so thank you everyone who contributed in the discussion in the 6 different rooms there. I hope you had an interesting discussion wherever you were. Certainly we had an interesting discussion where I was. So I think for the next 5 or 10 minutes, we're just going to go around each of the facilitators and maybe pick up on 1 or 2 of the things that were discussed in their group. I've volunteered to go first. And at the end of that time, after, as I say, about 10 minutes, we're going to pass over to Andrea Cameron, who's going to lead the final part of the session. So I'm not sure we actually answered any of the questions. We just had a general conversation about diagnostic testing and baseline testing, and in a way that's sort of how we expected it might happen. We talked about how the challenge of helping students to engage with the support that's available, and whether diagnostic testing and baseline testing was going to be a useful way to do that, or whether it was just too much effort on the part of the staff delivering it. I'm very aware, because I analyse the NSS and the module evaluation feedback for our university. I'm very aware that students tell us they can't find things that we know we provide them. So to say, I couldn't find the information about when the exam was. I couldn't find information about X, Y, Z. And I think in a way, it raises in my mind the issue of, if we've got a service, why let the student get to the point where they have a crisis and need to use that service? Why can't we then try and help them understand before they need the service that they need the service? And we have a big issue at GCU with students who've been to college for the first 2 years of their higher education, and they are studying under a very different regime, because they're studying through open book exams, competency-based learning, etc., open learning, and then they come to university and they lack some of the key study skills that we expect of them at university, and yet they've only got 18 months left of their university career before they graduate. So there's a very backloaded thing. If we could target our support at those students and say, this is how you've been learning at college, this is how you've been learning at university, how do we get you from one to the other through the use of diagnostic tests and targeted intervention? I think that would be a really powerful way for us to do that. But anyway, thanks to the people in my group for their input into our discussion. It was really interesting to listen to you all. Okay, Luke, do you want to say what came in out of your group and then pass on to one of our other facilitators?
Certainly, Colin. Well, clearly I had the best group because they were magnificent, and they came up with the some ideas around focusing on the process and making sure that students had the opportunity to follow up and be directed to specific resources and understanding the implications for those particular resources. We talked about normalization and utilizing this as a tool to make it normal for students to access resources rather than seeing as being remedial, you know, and how through this introduction at a very early point we could make sure that students just saw that's been part of going to university is you access all this support actually, because that's making the most of the bang for the bang you pay to go to university. And then we also talked about how can we use this to help students take charge of their learning path. You know, we talked about personalization, but actually if students actually can utilize these tools to direct them through their particular study and access particular resources at a particular time, maybe they're starting to take charge of their own learning, which might not be a bad thing for many of our students. But thank you to my group as well. So really interesting discussion, and we could have gone on for another 20 minutes at least. Who's next?
I'm happy to feedback if you'd like.
Go on, Andrea.
Well, on that very topic, because it kind of nicely segues from what you've just said, Luke, in terms of the personalisation. We had a discussion around about the ownership and the responsibility aspect, and one of our colleagues kind of sort of said, oh, you know, students going to get to the end of their degree and then blame us in terms of, you know, their classification and that we didn't support them. And I said, well, that's what we're hopefully trying to prevent through doing some of this work and getting students to kind of from the early points really recognise that they're masters of their own destiny, and that they, you know, will put a lot of the infrastructure in place. And we had some discussion about how we wean the students away from that infrastructure again, so they kind of learn, but it is that whole transition process in, and that they, you know, they're adjusting. And that, you know, so we had some colleagues in the room who've done quite a lot in this space already, you know, who can see quite clearly correlations between what happens in the foundation and in the early parts of programs and what the results from these things in terms of later success. And again, the more that we can get that messaging out to the students about the importance and the relevance of these things. But the reality is we can only do so much signposting. So in early, you know, so a colleague was describing, you know, that in the early days, you know, sort of kind of cajoling the students, reminding them that these sessions are on. But as you get later on, that you tend to kind of, you know, sort of step back from that because you hope they've either learned the good habits or that actually they've recognised that, you know, they do have to take recharge. And again, you know, we spoke a bit about that reset process because some of that's been projected onto us as academics because of the environment that we're working in and the remote learning, and a lot of that infrastructure is maybe not so visible. So therefore we've had to do a lot of that signposting and guiding and cajoling and nagging and whichever, and that's possibly not sustainable in the longer term sort of. So but you know, quite rightly we sort of said we're doing that obviously for us here at Abertay, we're doing this in the first year, but that might not be, you know, we need to think about those who are now coming back to campus potentially having had different models of delivery, and also as I say at different stages. You know, Colin's just described about students transitioning in from further education, about again where's the wraparound and the guidance and the signposting, and for them to be able to benchmark where they are and therefore come at it with a sort of, you know, that thing about, right, okay, I need to know what the support is, I need to know how to be guided through this, help me, and then I can fly. And that's what we all want, is our students to kind of succeed at the end of the day, but we do need to kind of put the infrastructure in place. So apologies if I've kind of taken a wee bit of artistic license in terms of what some colleagues said, but hopefully I've also managed to capture what came out of the discussion as well, as brief as it was.
Maggie.
Yeah, again, a really interesting discussion, could have gone on for another probably hour, but sort of following on a bit from what Andrea was saying, we were saying that students sometimes they want to know about the support that's available to them, they want to make use of it, but they also don't want to be bombarded with emails all the time about what's available to them from different directions. So potentially something like a diagnostic or a discovery tool might help with that. It will provide everything in one place. It gives them a feel for where they are. We also said sometimes students don't really know what they need support with anyway. So accessing support, how are they going to identify what they need? So in the same way, that might be a useful way to use the tool. And interestingly, some students don't access support because they think other students need it more than they do. So they will actually go and use the support because they don't feel that they deserve it, I guess. So that is quite interesting. I hadn't thought about that at all. So those were the main things that came out. It was really around that how do we signpost students question.
Holly, do you want to go next?
Hi, Lou. Yeah. So I had a really rich discussion in my group as well, but we went only through the first questions, and apologies to the ones in my breakout group because I was just trying to race through the questions and I forgot to ask everyone to introduce themselves, but thank you very much for your input. So what we talked about, we felt like we need more guidance for undergraduate students because we feel like some of them are not ready to take that ownership and engage with the diagnostic tools. So we feel like it might be actually restrictive to some of the students to start with, because it's about guiding students and helping them to increase their self-awareness and barriers to learning. But after that, we think while diagnostic are helping students to become independent learners, becoming an independent learner itself can help with self-regulated learning skills, which can lead to more autonomy and agency for students. So we felt like the approach for undergrad students probably needs to be different than postgraduate students, where we do more signposting. With UG students, probably we need to give more directions and more guidance to ensure more engagement with the diagnostics. We felt like if we leave it to students to engage with it, probably we will have students who are more responsible and take ownership of learning, having more engagement with the diagnostic, but this won't be the case for everyone. So we think to begin with, probably we'll need more guidance, and then later we can take the scaffolding and the guidance away and allow students to have more ownership over their learning. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. Heather?
Thank you. We spoke about the use of diagnostics for maybe personalisation and choice, and actually there was an interesting example in our group of saying that diagnostics actually lead to less choice in their case, because where a student is flagged up as needing support in a particular, they enroll on a course or a module to provide that support. So actually it kind of reduces their choice in what they're learning, but it does direct them to the content that they need to learn about. So it's kind of a different way of looking at things, and whether we put that in the hands of the institution. There was a little bit of discussion about, you know, the ownership of the process and whether that sits with the academic department or the personal academic tutor. In some cases, personal academic tutors are also disciplinary academics, but perhaps they don't have the skill set necessary to support that kind of additional support needs. So perhaps the role needs to be looked at, or the ownership of the diagnostic would be in a specialist unit rather than with the local academic. And then finally, I think there was just the worry of overwhelming students with lots of stuff in induction, and where does this sit? If it sits in induction in a sea of everything else, is that just one of the other things that students do in the first couple of weeks? So I suppose it's about the follow-up, and somebody in our group suggested that they were, you know, extending things over a year, and you might want to integrate diagnostic into that kind of year-long journey rather than just at the beginning.
So
Am I the last one? Who was next?
Yeah, I think everyone's fed back now, so thanks everyone for feeding back. It looks like maybe the choice of questions that we put up in the Padlets, even though they no one got round to answering all of them, did at least shape the session, because we certainly focused in on induction, on the needs of students, the abilities of students to take advantage of it. I thought Holly's point about the undergraduates needing a bit more direction was quite interesting. And I thought there was mention of scaffolding fade around there that needs to become. So I think there's a lot of issues, and I suppose it's to separate out some of the pedagogic issues from some of the more practical issues, and that's why diagnostic testing is such a big area, is that there's not simple solutions. There's not a one solution that would work for everyone. Part of me or part of my experience at GCU is the way we actually see diagnostic testing might actually be a way of helping students have more awareness but less commitment for their work. I also wonder, something that's not been mentioned at all here is whether there's any potential for getting more advanced students to contribute to the induction process. We have at GCU, we've got something called PALS, Peer Assisted Learning Support, where we get, I think it draws on the academic families idea, where you get more experienced students helping out with the induction of the and the orientation of the newer students. That's especially important in professional practice, in physiotherapy and nursing, where they're building towards professional recognition. But I think it works for every course. And some sort of hybrid where you take some of the ideas of academic families and bring them into induction and in diagnostic testing might be a way forward. I wonder, I think the last part of today's session is to ask Andrea to think through some of our ideas about taking the appetite for diagnostic testing forward, maybe under the auspices of the enhancement themes and our focus on resilient learning communities. Do you want to say a bit about that, Andrea, or Luke, do you want to interject?
Thanks, Colin. I'll spend roughly about 10 minutes just kind of positioning where we could go around about a community practice, and then I'm going to hand back over to Luke just to kind of summarise potentially from today. So this particular collaboration came into being as a consequence of us, looking to extend our, and build a community practice in relation to kind of pedagogic research. And knowing that many of us are time pressed, but if we are still in the classroom, we're often doing active sort of things, innovations, etc. But one of the things often we don't do is share what we're doing. And we need to get the word out there and learn from each other, and so we really are trying to kind of foster that kind of type of activity. So this is where we want to take the opportunity to reach out to colleagues who come into this space today. And what's become certainly very evident for me is that there are people already doing things. People are at different stages of that kind of delivering this type of self-assessments. Some people have been doing it for years, some are just coming into it. But even for those that maybe been doing it for a longer period of time, we've just had the whole pandemic, and there is that bit of a reset. And did the tools that you used previously, are they still valid in this kind of new way of delivery, in the sort of with the students and their approaches to their education delivery? And we've spoken about reset and the fact that there has been this disruption. So do we now need to go back and reflect upon the things that we've done previously? Do they still have validity, on how do we need to evolve those things. So if I take the who, where, what, when, why, and how kind of model, then, you know, in terms of, you know, I think that's certainly where we could go in relation to this kind of community of practice. Some people are already doing things. So what are you doing? That's what we kind of want to find out and maybe flush out, and sort of in there for, you know, do we start to congregate that by disciplines or by type of institution or by, you know, the qualities or the characteristics of students who are engaging in these spaces. So that's the kind of what, you know, how are you doing it, and certainly want to discover that. Who's engaging, and that's, you know, there's been some discussion in the chat there about, you know, we know that there's some students who feel less able to come forward and either ask for help. And it was a very interesting sort of thing you said, Maggie, about either they don't feel that they deserve it, or they feel that they might be taking it away from those who maybe have more need. So therefore they don't want to put themselves in that space. And that's a very sort of altruistic, unselfish kind of thing to do. However, it's that thing that we know is the people who often need this most aren't always the ones that come forward. So how do we reach out? And so if people are having success in that area, we really want to know, who did you get to, how did you get to them, what worked? And so, and, you know, we've talked about the when already in terms about, you know, do we extend induction? And I know at Abertay we're thinking of doing, I think the terms are relentless welcome. Is that how you build it, Luke? Yep. So that it's not just seen as a, you know, induction week. We do something and then, you know, that's it. It's that we keep sort of kind of filtering things into the curriculum. And so if people are already again doing these kind of activities in terms of the when is it best to do this? When are we likely to get the maximal engagement? What's the outcome from these things? We know that sometimes students don't always tend to do things till they, you know, they work on a need to know. So tell me about it, or I'll access it just before the assessment. Unfortunately, that's often too late. And you know, I just sat at some student disciplinary sort of plagiarism cases this morning, and that was exactly it. They left it too late, and there was real need there. And unfortunately, you know, they didn't discover it until it was assessment sort of time. So it's those kind of things about, as I say, when, you know, where are we delivering it? Is it online? Is it in classroom, face to face? You know, and who is delivering these things as well? And where's, you know, we talked about who's got the skill sets to do it. How do we integrate it? So I think there's a real richness in what we could be doing going forward. There, you know, loads of headlines, and certainly what I'll do is capture some of those headlines afterwards in terms of, you know, these are some ideas out there and let's start the conversation. I know one of the things that you're going to get asked on the back of this meeting is if you would be happy for your contact details to be shared. We put something together and we reach out, and I say we really do want to learn from each other, and I do thank you for coming along today and being willing to sort of engage in the discussion, to post ideas in the chat, and in the brief time that we had to sort of kind of debate and discuss for putting those ideas in it, and I say just helping us discover what's happening already. So on that, I'll stop and you know hear from you at a point in the future, but I'll turn over to Luke to kind of summarise today's workshop. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Colin, for leading us through those sessions. Really good. Yeah, so that's not hard to do with it, Andrea. Summarise what's gone on. Okay. Well, we're at the start, aren't we? For many of us here, this is the start of a conversation. This is the start of a journey. I think we've outlined some of the approaches that are being undertaken. We've heard from various people across the sector as to what they're doing, and clearly a lot of the challenges are common. I think as we are at that start of the journey, and Andrea said I use the term relentless welcome when it's not me. I steal it from other people much wiser than myself. But the relentless welcome piece, again, for me, harks back actually to the learn and gain piece, you know, which we started at the beginning of this talk. It's about how do we show the added valueness of being at university for a student? How do we help them build their own confidence and steer their own path through a university? And those are some of the challenges that we think we're facing, and some of the things that we think perhaps a diagnostic approach might help us with. So we're going to keep talking to you. I do apologise. We're going to keep talking to you. We've now got your email address, so we know where you live. Okay, we're going to keep talking to you. We're going to send you some stuff. You will choose to ignore us or engage with us, but we will pester you in a very polite way, and see where we go with this. You know, because I say, I need to thank a few people. I need to thank the QAA for, first of all, listening to what we said and sponsoring us in this regard, and I need to thank obviously Colin and Holly and Heather and Andrew and Maggie for actually listening to me and putting up with me all these times, but actually for introducing some really interesting elements into our debate. But also need to thank you as well for participating in this today, because I think you have helped shape where the future direction of this might be. You've reinforced and reassured us of some of the things we've been talking about, but also I think you've set us some new challenges as well. So I initially said to my colleagues that we were aimed to finish at about quarter to 4, and we are bang on quarter to 4. So that is a remarkable judgment of luck. But all I will say again is thank you. We will contact you, and as I say, we'd like to engage you in that conversation as we move forward, because we think there's a real opportunity here for us to change the way in which we do things. Because actually, I think the ways in which we've, as a sector, have been doing things haven't changed for a long while, and perhaps now is the opportunity for us to take hold of this and to try and steer things in a different direction. So thanks again for participating.